Good evening, folks. Back after a little over a week here at From the Tomes. Thanks for tuning in, as always. Tonight's going to be a little bit more of an informal chat. Not to say that any of them are formal or that they're very structured, but tonight's going to be a little bit even more informal. Just kind of a little catch up to let you know where I'm at in terms of the game company, the streaming, a lot of other stuff that's been going on recently, which is all pretty cool. There's a hippogriff in the room that I think will eventually fly its way into conversation tonight, and that of course is OGL 1.2 and the recent industry antics around such things. So it's gonna get interesting. Everything is still really interesting. It's still really in flux. Try to adjust my chat screen a little bit. Give you the normal little spiel here from the Tomes on Twitch TV from the Tomes. If you're watching this live, you know where to find that. If you're watching this on YouTube, you might want to head over and subscribe. I've gotten a few new subscribers in the past couple weeks. Thank you very much. YouTube at Fox and Board Games. All kinds of stuff, fun stuff at YouTube at Fox and Board Games. In fact, I actually probably should update my viewing order on a couple things. Oh look, my YouTube stream feed is just filled with OGL stuff. No shocker, right? We'll talk all about that.
So I need to sleep for.
So we've got episode 4.
4 days.
Well, no, I just said you can sleep for 8 hours and you get to. It's okay.
Tales of the Hard Land playthrough over on the YouTube channel, among a lot of other content. It's at Fox and Board Games. We've got Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at Fox and Board Games. Thanks everyone for liking, subscribing, and following. And thanks for everyone tuning in tonight. And there's I'll drop like and subscribe. There's our YouTube channel, and here's a little bit of the game from two
Close enough?
2 weeks ago, last weekend.
Okay, we'll freeze there and we'll go to the.
So
as he's running up the street.
it's a fun time. It's a fun time playing the game and play testing.
So you know you are.
Fun time playing the game and play testing. As you see, there are some familiar faces to those of you in any kind of real life adjacency to me. Adjacency, is that a word? But I'll let you go watch that on your own. We have another episode recorded as of this week, and we will be putting it up probably Friday. I think that's going to be the plan. And for this story, there's probably going to be one more episode after that. Why is my chat screen not showing? There it is. I don't know why it does that. That's an extremely annoying phenomena. Just checking to make sure things are in place. So we're a little quiet so far, which is fine. The first of this is that I am intending to do this once every 2 weeks at this time. And I decided on that for a number of reasons. I just realized. I heard a rumor Meta was down. Yeah, there it is. It's back. I was gonna say, if someone's trying to get here through the Facebook invite or through the Instagram link, they're not going to. At least not at this moment. Hey, there's Justin. How's it going? Your shining face was just on the big screen. On the big screen from our playtest 2 weeks ago, or last weekend, not this past weekend, the previous weekend, not quite 2 weeks ago. So yeah, I'll be doing this every 2 weeks. I will be popping on during the weeks to do work chats, not as much as I was over the summer or even later in the fall. And the reason is I really need to progress the work on the Tales of the Hard Land book, which is going very well. Some of you who follow me on social media know And I'm well over 400 pages on content right now. This has not been edited. This has not been laid out. It is not even fully formatted yet in terms of information flow. So it's still going to be a subject to change, but I seriously doubt that it is going to get any smaller. In fact, I've had to pull some ideas out of the initial book that I've been writing. Some of you saw me working on the religion and the spirituality section. I think there will be a very condensed version in this book. The original plan was to give more possibilities for people to play characters with abilities inspired by the mythology and the religion and spirituality of this world. Unfortunately, I just think it's going to be way too much. It's almost like creating another whole subsystem. There aren't quite clerics. Clerics would be the wrong way to think about it. They would be more like avatars, or have embodied aspects of various deities and various supernatural powers. But I think it's going to be too much for this version of the game. I think there's already so much there that I think it just needs to get to a point where maybe a little bit of that has been touched on, and then it's going to, from there, develop into a larger game. With supplements, of course. Source books and supplements, because that's how we sell game stuff, right? That's how we sell quality game stuff. That's how we sell stuff that people actually want to come through and buy. Let's see, where else am I? Some of you also know last night I ran my first Start Playing Games, the site Start Playing Games. First official. This whole idea of being called a professional game master is still really kind of funny to me. I mean, again, I've been doing this as a hobby for a really, really long time. And I have run this I've run these games in public capacity before at conventions, including coordinating and assisting with LARPs that run sometimes 200 people in attendance. And I've never really thought of it as a type of thing that, it's going to be a professional pursuit. I'll have to get the title of professional game master, but apparently I am, because I ran a pretty successful Call of Cthulhu game last night for quite a few excited players. It was really fun. It ran very later than I anticipated. And they seemed to all have a good time. I got some good feedback. Hey, there's Peach. What's going on? Got some pretty good feedback on it today. Not that I thought players were having a bad time, but you never know. Players tend to be people tend to be very polite when you're with them in this space. But then to get feedback the next day and have people say, oh yeah, I really liked the game, it was really fun. That was really cool. So there'll be more of that. And again, I can't talk too much about that, and I can't do too much of that simply because I am still under a sabbatical contract, which greatly restricts what I can do in terms of anything that's considered outside employment, and that is considered overly profitable. And there's some discussion about how we're going to deal with that, because we have some stuff coming up that hopefully will be used almost entirely to fund Tales of the Harrowed Land and Fox and Board Games. So it's not like I'm sitting here getting another job to pay my bills while I'm on sabbatical, though I probably should, for the amount of money I get on sabbatical. But that's okay. I get the freedom to write a game and have enough money to get by. So what else? Well, this week officially launched the social media campaign in conjunction with my very good friend of a number of years now, Maeve, who does this for a living, does social media and marketing for a living, and over at Raven Productions, and it's been going pretty well. I've turned over the bulk of my social media to someone else. And if any of you know me and have worked with me, you know that That's not a particularly easy thing for me to do as a creative. I don't like just kind of letting go the control and being like, here. But we've gotten to a point that social media is a skill into itself. Let's see. Mjolnir Maeve. Hey, there's Mjolnir. There's Maeve right now. That is a weird face, isn't it? I thought you were in a chat before. I didn't realize you were never in a chat. So I was just talking about your company and the work you've been doing. And it's been pretty cool so far. After we got all the technical bugs, it's 2023 and we still spent 2 days figuring out how to do a post from an app to several things. That's what I thought. I thought you had jumped on early on at one point. So that's kind of where we're at. Kind of where we're at with the company. And so far we've been seeing some good results. Again, we have a few more things that are going to be appearing. It's like everything just refreshed at once. I had like no viewers and nothing in the chat for like probably the first 10 minutes, and clearly people were talking, which is really weird. So I'm like, yeah, okay. So now everything just got very glitchy. Meta was down for a bit. All of Meta. Suspicious. So I was like, yeah, I don't know if we're going to get too many people on tonight if they can't get to the invite link. So we did have the invite link up. So that's kind of where Fox and Boar Games is. And again, I'll be at TotalCon at the end of February, which is the other reason why I am limiting the amount of chat time and streaming time, because I have most of the content done for the games at TotalCon. They are at last check, they were almost all filled up, which was just crazy. Again, the popularity level of all of this, and I'm not running Dungeons and Dragons. I'm running my own game. Hey, how are you, CC? I'm running my own game, and I'm running Call of Cthulhu, and the sessions are like almost all filled. So I'm sitting here like, okay. Things are very different. The dynamic of all this is very different, and people are really excited to play. And the fact that on a weeknight, I had half a dozen people from all over the country, a couple local and a couple far flung, up till midnight playing a game with complete strangers. Almost all complete strangers. I did actually know 2 of the people previously before the game. It really is a testament to how this has changed in the past 5 years, much less the past 25 or 35 years. And at one point I felt bad because the one guy, we were right at the ending counter. The guy's like, I gotta really go to bed. I'm like, look, if you gotta run, but he stuck it through. He really wanted to see how it concluded. Nobody died or went insane. It's the first time running Cold Plague, this scenario, that nobody died or went insane. I was very shocked. Yeah, I know. You're at the end of this. I have a couple friends in Germany too. Always are like, I really want to come on to your chat, but I know I'm not gonna make it. So yeah, this scenario will appear again online. This is also running at TotalCon. I have it at a 2-hour slot. It went for close to 6 hours last night. So clearly something has to change. I've run it for about 4 hours. The first time I ran it was closer to 5, and I trimmed a bunch of stuff out of it. And then I ran it for 4 hours, like a solid 4-hour session, and that went pretty well. And I thought, okay, 4 hours. I got some really good suggestions today from people who've played iterations of it as to what to trim out to make it, a solid 3 to 4, a definite 3 to 4. And then there was a really great suggestion to even cut out a couple of the scene elements. Which am I looking forward to running the most? Obviously, I'm really looking forward to running Tales, the Tales of the Howard Land games, because I really want to see broadly how people respond to it. The response to it, even though I only had one full session at PAX, and PAX is huge. I mean, getting anyone's attention at PAX, unless you are one of the star celebrity GMs there running Dungeons and Dragons, was virtually impossible. There were a few people who arranged games beforehand, and there were some early signups, and next year I will go into the early signup queue, and that will probably change things. But, the session I ran at PAX was extremely well received. People picked up on the game very easily. I did have a couple suggestions, which I integrated into the new rule set. And one of them was valid, and one of them I absolutely knew was going to be a thing, and people have told me it's a thing, and I kept just kind of resisting it. And then, when I heard 3 players out of the 4 at the table say, "Yeah, this part was really confusing," I was like, "All right, it's got to go." No matter how much intellectually I think it fits with the game or whatever, it doesn't. It doesn't fit. There was one other suggestion that was hard for me to read whether or not it was just the player didn't like it or they really genuinely thought that it didn't add to the game, but it's really essential, and I really kind of can't get rid of it. So it's gonna stay. I mean, unless I get the game out at a playtest level broadly, which will be happening now, and everybody comes back and says, this has to go, which I don't think they will. I don't think they will. And basically, the player complained because there was an extra step in one of the rule sets, and of course, part of me is thinking like, well, you never played First Ed Dungeons and Dragons where you had to roll. And again, I know that that's all very archaic now, but this is an essential step in the way the characters interface with the world and using certain powers in the world. So it's not going away. If I have to modify it, I have to modify it. I am looking forward to the Call of Cthulhu sessions, and I think that should be interesting. Running them in person, because I haven't run. Well, I haven't run either of these sessions in person. Cold Plague has only been online, and again, I got a great suggestions from Neil this morning as to a way to minimize and compress time and minimize the characters kind of getting lost in the world and not finishing. So, the second Cthulhu scenario that I'll be running is going to be interesting because that's the last session I have to really spend some time rewriting and working into a playable game. So that's where I'm at as far as. I mean, obviously my own game is the one I'm looking forward to running the most because that's where everything. That's kind of where all the eggs are in the basket. That all the eggs are in at the moment is to get this finished and get this rolling. So yeah, and I'm looking forward if a session doesn't. I mean, all my sessions are filled. I'm pretty much booked like every day from the minute I get there Friday at like 5 p.m. I plan to get there around 3, and then but from 5 o'clock on, it'll give me time to get into the Airbnb and then get over to the convention center and check in. Pretty much from that moment until Sunday afternoon, I'm pretty much booked. But if I should have a lapse where I don't have a lot of time, I'll look forward to going and sitting down and playing another game. I think that'll be cool. And then once Total Con's over, I'll probably put some more games up online for people to play. I have not gotten any online attendance or any online signups for the Tales of the Howd Land game, and that's simply because there's no recognition for it yet. There's no brand recognition for it yet. So we'll see how that goes. I'm looking forward to it. I'm hedging slowly towards the hippogriff in the room, the continued discussions on the OGL and all things thereof. So, everything that comes into my mind about publishing. So Tom Curzon was down. He'll be around this weekend, but he was down last weekend to play Tales, and we had this whole discussion beforehand about game publication, and the joy kind of is not ever having attached myself to D20 in any way, shape, and form. I'm kind of like, whatever. But we're still at a point that the industry is extremely tied to everything that Wizards and Hasbro does. So again, we're all kind of just sitting there. Another little bit of news. Let's see. I received my official confirmation and invite to Paizo's Orc Alliance Open RPG community license, which is their answer to the whole OGL thing. Paizo publishes Pathfinder. There are quite a few game companies who have signed on. So hopefully a name shall appear there. My name shall appear there soon, maybe. And I did agree. I did, sign on to the agreement of the license, which is there's nothing to it. It's very much an open creative license in terms of using their material and producing their games. So that was kind of fun too, just seeing that little email appear. Welcome to the Orc Alliance. So we'll see. We'll see how that goes. So just as a brief update from where we last left off 2 weeks ago with the drama surrounding OGL 1.1, 1.2. Now, first of all, again, I have avoided doing any of this in a reactive fashion. There were people with YouTube videos out quite largely filled with false information. Again, like as this was being released. And again, I've sat at a couple forums and watched people repost these videos that are absolutely speculative. To me, it's like watching the History Channel and watching Ancient Aliens and assuming that this is documented history. That's been about the level of veracity that we've seen a lot of the YouTubers, these speculative YouTubers who all have leaks in the industry, who they can't name, come out with these really kind of outrageous things that have created these buzzes and everybody flocking to their videos. And on one hand, I'm like, well, okay, if you want to attract people to your content, this is clearly the way to do it. But I really resisted doing anything in that kind of reactive fashion. Yeah, oh, definitely. We're definitely in dumpster fire territory here. And, so Wizards then makes this statement pretty much the day after I did this chat 2 weeks ago. It was this awful statement, and I'm not going to show any of the videos to OGL, but they no, Wizards apologizes. No, they didn't apologize at all, and that was kind of the problem. Is they kind of said, let's see, there's Bear. The news made it to NPR this afternoon. It was in the Wall Street Journal. At one point earlier this week, this whole thing was in the Wall Street Journal, and you're just sitting there going, wow. So, they come out with this statement that basically says, in this part I do agree with, that, most of these YouTubers don't know what they're talking about. And clearly, as I've been very clear, there are some who have been given very good information, often backed up by lawyers, and they name the lawyers and they give references who've talked about it. Okay. But then there are these kind of like sensationalist, like, Fox News levels of YouTubers who are just like raving and making things up about what D&D is going to become and what they're going to do. And it's fine to speculate, because I've got enough of my own speculation of how this is going to play out. But I don't claim it's fact, or I have an inside leak to support it. But Wizards, made the investment news. And that's what it really is. No, they haven't apologized. And the articles are basically turning it around and saying, well, no, that's really not what we meant, and you guys have us all wrong, and we would never do any of that. Where it clearly said in this draft, well, this is what we're going to do. And representatives of people from Paizo and Kobold Press responded in such a way that clearly this is what was told to them was going to happen. A YouTuber sitting there and claiming all these horrible things is one thing that we can go, yeah, these are people just trying to be sensationalists. When the reps of some of the largest secondhand publishing houses, that's not secondhand, the next largest publishing houses start to pull their support and respond officially, then you absolutely, after their NDR goes away, then they absolutely were intent on OGL1 was how it was going to go, including all the horrible things about having propriety over the rights of people who have published under the properties that have been published under the Open Gaming License. Oh yeah, that world, this X world under OGL was really successful. We're going to take it and republish it. That's, I think, the part that even the people I know who are the staunchest D&D players and the staunchest WotC supporters were just like, come on. Again, that does not exist anywhere else in the legal worlds except for sleazy record and book contracts that were out with the 90s and the 80s. So their response wasn't even an apology. It was like this at the same time retreating and saying, "Oh, but we were actually right. You're actually wrong." Like, I was like, "Oh my god!" Like, you just made it worse. Like, and it's funny because somebody posted today. I forget where it was on a friend's timeline about. We just watched Games Workshop do the same exact thing, not within the last 10 years, and quite nearly go bankrupt. Like, at what point did anybody watch that, take notes, and circle the parts that said, destroy all community support? Make sure that they'll go and play other games so they don't buy our product anymore, and say, this is the platform that we're going to build our new OGL on. So then there was, and again, I'm very quick to say what quite a few people have said. One, this is standard operating procedure in world-like software design and video games, and that's the problem. Is that this kind of thing is just almost standard procedure, and people don't even blink. And CC, who may or may not have already fallen asleep, who is in the IT and software world, said a couple weeks ago, this is just the way it is in my world. This is new to your world, but this is totally new to my world. So, it's a case that they've misunderstood and totally miscalculated the response of what pen and paper gamers and players will do, and how they respond to things like this. And it is not the same. It is not the same as other industries. So they have this horrible response, and we know this is all corporate. Right? We know this is all entirely at the executive level. These people who have no interest in the community. They have interest in the movie rights. Make sure they can only market toys for the movies or adventures based on the movie. Making sure that they absolutely have complete control over any secondary properties that come out of D&D in the immediate future. So then a few days later or the next day, there is this kind of sheepish survey that's released by one of the lead developers of Dungeons and Dragons at this point with Wizards. And again, there was no admission. Again, they're sticking to this line. Oh, we just floated that out. We always want community input. Well, no, I don't really believe that. And again, I posted the survey to the survey that they released. The first, they only released the survey to people with an active D&D Beyond subscription because they lost almost $2 million projected off of people who canceled their subscriptions. And I was honestly shocked that was that much, because Skullstein said to me, how much do you think they're losing on that? I said, people are weird. They're not that reactive and loyal. Well, apparently they were this reactive and loyal. And I'll admit that I was very surprised that the community, even, GMs who are making money off this, canceled their subscription. And I guess the old adage is true when it comes to politicians and corporations. You have to hit them where it hurts. And that's their wallet. And that's what they really care about. So they've started backpedaling, like on a unicycle, like backpedaling on a unicycle, and rolling back all these statements they made. And in fact, the most recent fact that came out about this, let's see, D&D Beyond bonus to OGL, which I actually had up before. Oh, that's the Foundry responses. Now, again, I don't really use. So, yeah, well, here's the extensive criticism. OGL 1.2. There we go. So now on the D&D and Beyond site, you do not have to sign back up. This is now an open survey to the community who is invited to give their feedback. And I actually haven't done it yet. And I just kind of haven't gotten to it. I've been busy doing. So again, is D&D Beyond planning to release a $30 subscription? No, these are rumors. Is homebrew content going away? No, these are rumors. Is Wizards working on AI DMs? No, this is rumors. Now, come on. We all know that this probably is not a rumor. They've probably just really realized how bad this is going to impact them. You know, are we going to shut down virtual tabletops with OGL 1.2? I mean, they can't force anybody to shut down, but they can say you can only run Dungeons and Dragons on their platform. You know, it's a weird space we're in. And the fact they've backpedaled this heavily, to me, as I've said before, it's like political platforms being floated out to catch a response from the voting population and the constituents. And how do we think this is going to poll? And that's almost what this is like. So we're at a weird point where now we're just waiting to see what they really do next year. You know, and I've talked to my gaming group frankly about it, and we're at various ends of this, various points on the spectrum of response. You know, and I think and Blake, who is still a very active MMO player and video gamer, you know, and he has said this has gone on so many times in the video game community, and the period of time, the dozen or so years that the second time I was heavily involved in online gaming communities. It's true. You know, a company says that all these things are going to happen in a patch, and the community goes absolutely, you know, batshit. And they just decide that, you know, okay, we're going to roll that back. We're going to change it. This can backfire too, though, you know, and I've talked about this even in playtesting. What about the wish list? You know, everybody has a wish list for what they want out of their game. And if you try to please everybody on the wish list, then you are never going to actually have a workable product. And that's unfortunately what, in my opinion, was happened with so many video games, particularly online games. That and the inability to support the infrastructure. But that's kind of where we're at. This is the hippogriff in the room. Whenever we're talking about gaming. So I had a friend post earlier that he's really been interested in playing these games. An acquaintance. He's not someone who I know very well. In fact, he's up your way. He's up in upstate New York. That would be Bear and Skullstein and a few of the others who come on here. And he was, you know, really looking for people to learn to play D&D with. And, you know, he got the range of responses from, oh, you should join Pathfinder instead. Or join Fishblade. We should play Fishblade. That was the ongoing joke on my feed earlier this week. You know, that is Fishblade real? Fishblade is real. I just assumed this was a joke, unless it was just published in the last 3 hours or something. Because the meme is okay. Wow. We'll have to tell Adam that, you know, we were pulling his leg about Fishblade. I'll have to go dig Fishblade out of my cache here. You know, that's the joke, is now that there's this rockiness with D&D, you know, you have the entire Pathfinder community is like, now is our moment to shine. Everybody's going to come play Pathfinder. I thought it was fake too. I thought Fishblade was fake. I'm going to go get the Fishblade meme. I've been circulating this all week and I had no idea this was a real game. Joke's on me. Oh, come on. Give me my Fishblade meme now. It was all over the place earlier. Very few things make me laugh out loud at this point. Fishblade does. Here we are. Open Mission tab. So, you know, Fishblade. Now that Wizards of the Coast has lost all its goodwill, there's a bunch of people being like, finally, now your group that has been playing D&D for 14 years can switch to Fishblade, the diceless storytelling game where the party controls one fish with a knife. I absolutely thought this was a joke. I was positively convinced Fishblade was a joke. We had a whole discussion about it. Skullstein and I had a whole discussion about it. and I was, making fun of Fishblade even though not knowing it was real. Amber, Amber's a legitimate system though. Amber's a legitimate game. I've never really gotten into Amber, but it's a thing. Amber's a real thing. PJ plays Amber. Fishblade was quite literally, I thought this was made up. I thought this was a joke. So Fishblade, a storytelling game where the party controls a fish ship with a knife. Uh, it's a one-page game. Here it is. Fishblade. Sexy battle wizards instead of D&D, or thirsty sword lesbians is the other one but that's a legit game, and I know people who've played it, and it's supposed to be a very, very good game. And that's kind of sexy battle wizards. That's definitely up the alley. Amber Diceless is very interesting. I've only played the one game of it that Hackett ran, and it was definitely interesting. I think you need just the right group, and I don't think we had just the right group. Several members of the group at the time fall in the shall not be named category. So I think you can make some leaps as to who was involved in the game. And it really was just not fun. There was nothing fun. And I think part of it was it's a tough game to run. Yeah, exactly. I think it's a good game to run if you have the right group and if you have a storyteller who's actually very experienced with improv. And this was a whole discussion we were having in a couple different forums. So Fishblade, we're joking about Fishblade, and we're like, everybody's now pitching their favorite niche art RPG to replace D&D. And I've seen a lot of these niche art RPGs. And I've described it as, let's see. Yeah, I haven't played that. Well, that's the thing too, is Amber's actually very competitive. And that's the other thing that it's kind of difficult to wrap your mind around when you sit down to play. Amber is very political, and it is very conflict oriented. And that's another thing with the wrong group that just doesn't work. But a lot of these kind of niche RPGs that I've looked at and that I've even played like one-offs of, they're interesting in the way modern art is interesting. They're interesting in the way a lot of craft beer is interesting. They're interesting intellectually. Is it a satisfying experience on any other level besides reading the thesis behind it and going, that's pretty clever? Some of these games are not. And that's kind of the joke. Like, everyone's like, oh, jump ship. Instead of D&D, you should play this. And again, I actually spent a lot of time with Pathfinder the past week. And in summary, it's well crafted. It is a lot more varied in possibility and content and player character interaction mathematically and systemically than is D&D. It is crunchy. It's not a game that, let's say, my in-person group who meets, right now we're finishing off a Tales of the Howard Land run. We might hook up with another game again towards the summer. They want a very specific emotional experience out of a role-playing game. They're not going to enjoy the number crunching and the kind of minutia aspects of Pathfinder. I don't think. So, as it was put, this idea that D&D is going to topple in some other small press or even medium-sized press. The difference between Paizo's gross yearly and Hasbro WotC's gross yearly is like my income versus, Jeff Bezos, or somebody like that. I mean, maybe not that exaggerated as between mine and Jeff Bezos. There's probably maybe it's a little closer between Paizo and AD&D, but well, exactly, and that's exactly it. D&D is the cultural shorthand for tabletop role-playing game, fantasy role-playing game, and it has been for 40 years. Whether it's been derided or lauded, as it has been the past 5 years, and this is the first time in the history of the game that you don't, metaphorically or perhaps literally get spit on when people find out you play role-playing games. it is the shorthand, and it is marketed. And D&D Beyond makes it extremely accessible. Extremely accessible. And that's why Pathfinder and even their Nexus system their Nexus system that they're working up to try the demiplane interface that they're going to try to create a D&D Beyond like experience for Pathfinder, it still does not have the brand recognition. It still does not have that name recognition, and brand recognition and name recognition and marketing is everything. Well, it's completely, Peach. It's completely marketed at this point. Let's compare it to Subway. Okay, I'm not going to compare it to McDonald's because I think there's still more quality in 5th Ed D&D than there is in McDonald's, and it's not quite as ubiquitous. But let's equate it to Subway, or maybe even let's compare it to Panera Bread. People compared to Kleenex. Better than Subway, Kleenex. It's ubiquitous, right? That's a good point. When people say Kleenex, what they really mean is a facial tissue, right? When people say Dungeons and Dragons, they mean a tabletop role-playing game. I actually had to turn people away from an online Tales of the Hallowed Land game because they thought it was Dungeons and Dragons. I actually had 2 signups, and they were like, "We really can't wait to learn D&D," and I was like, "Got some news for you." And I said, if you want to learn to play my game, that's fine. I said, but you're not going to learn to play D&D with this game. I said, I may be offering an intro to D&D session. So, and they were kind of like, oh, okay, thanks, but no thanks. And I was like, that's cool. Again, you want to play the biggest name or learn the biggest name game. And you want to learn it because you know it because your friends are playing it. Because you know it because your cool uncle from the 80s played it. That would be me at this point. It's maybe I'm not cool, but I would definitely be the uncle from the 80s. It's definitely a case where this recognition is almost everything. Shockingly, Call of Cthulhu has actually gotten very close. I've gotten extremely strong responses in my learn how to play Call of Cthulhu. The first session crashed and burned, and I don't know what was up with that. Like, I had everybody drop out a couple days before. I don't know if it was just timing. People were still busy from the holidays, but I had people basically for last night's session that were waiting to see if anybody dropped to get into the game, which is kind of cool considering it's not a game I consider particularly fun or friendly or easy. Even less so than D&D. I'm like, all right, if you want to play Call of Cthulhu, we can do that. And everybody was shocked they didn't die. They were like, we thought we were all going to die. Isn't this the game where everybody dies? And I'm like, well, no. D&D Beyond is dummy convenient, and I love it. Honestly, as a player, I love it. I haven't really run with D&D Beyond yet, but I sit at a table for my in-person group, and I'm running old school out of a book with some notes on my laptop. Yeah, the Game of Thrones RPG. Yeah. Well, that's interesting you say that. I don't know if there is an RPG supplement for Game of Thrones, but I was actually thinking of a 5th Ed core game that I bill as a Game of Thrones sort of. Now Amber's very Game of Thrones in tone. Amber's Game of Thrones in tone, and there have been a lot of worlds in D&D where there's a little bit more of that tone. But I was thinking of creating a very closed environment sandbox game that I bill as kind of Game of Thrones-like. So it is a bit more about intrigue and backstabbing and all these kinds of things and throwing it up on Roll20 and seeing what happens. That's when I'm able to do this aggressively for money. aggressively to commercially run games. Because again, the way you're going to do that is by running the big name games. And the way you're going to make money writing for these things is write for big name games. So it was kind of nice to get the Orc Alliance invitation from Paizo, or the confirmation, I should say. Because I'd been asked at one point, would you ever write up a D20 version of Tales? And at the time, this was probably about 1.5 years ago that it was suggested to me. And I said, well, if I'm starting a game company, I would be an absolute idiot if it's a company about making money and not a vanity project. Because again, a lot of game publications and game design are vanity projects and they just want to have their RPG out there and have people play it and tell them how great of an RPG is, and maybe they'll sell a couple books and they're happy with that. If I'm going to do this, it has to be a commercial enterprise. This isn't, and I had to explain this to people when they wrote me about publishing for the game or publishing things through Fox and Boar. I'm like, well, they're writer guidelines. Go look at them. I'm not going to just read your adventure and say I'm going to publish it because I'm your friend. Like, we can't do that. Like this, there has to be a level of uniformity, quality control, all those things that happen in actual publishing houses. And yes, I do have real world experience with this. So this is something I am comfortable doing. If somebody said, I'll fund you if you help design a game interface for multiplayer action, I would say absolutely not, 'cause no matter how much money is in it, I can't do it successfully. As far as actually publishing game content, that is something I can do. And I absolutely would have, for commercial purposes, produced a D20 version of Tales. If nothing else, to get the world out there. Because the world building is really the core of what I've done with it. Until we see what happens with OGL, I clearly am not going to do that. Would I do it for Pathfinder? For under the Orc license? Even if not specifically Pathfinder? Because it doesn't really fit Pathfinder. Pathfinder is very high fantasy. It's very, very heroic fantasy. I would consider doing it under the Orc license. I would definitely consider doing it under Pinnacle Savage Worlds, which is an open system. Because Savage Worlds, I believe, would really fit the mood of it. And I haven't jumped deep into Savage Worlds yet, but they're Deadlands. So, again, I've been a big fan of Deadlands, and Deadlands, at least the world, has inspired a lot of what I've written for various games. Everything from some of my D&D adventures to the stuff that I wrote for Blight Realms was heavily inspired by Deadlands. And to some degree, some of the Harold Lands material is too. Obviously, there's some resonance in the kind of pulp setting of the world, of the names. So, boy, we're stuck on Fishblade. I'm just agog at Fishblade. That Fishblade's real. Wow. So this brings me to the next game I'm going to be publishing, called Trash Sexy, about raccoons. That's my one-page game. I've been working on it mentally for a while. It's coming. It's coming. Don't worry. A few people have gotten little glimpses of it, including the character classes you can play. So, kind of the whole joke is that I'm going to spend 6 years of my life on Tales of the Hallowed Land, and I'll sell 50 copies, and I'll dump Trash Sexy on RPG, drive-through RPG, and I'll sell hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of copies because they're going to be cute raccoon drawings. So be it. If I have to use cute raccoons to sell my game, I will. I'm not above cute raccoons. I'm not above monetizing cute pets. So, yeah. Fishblade, huh? So we're in a very strange state. So it's been on NPR. It's been in several big investment-based games, publications that don't normally deal with games, except maybe at the video game level. So this was a big bit of an outcry here, because they talked about content restrictions on things you could publish in the next OGL. And this was, so now they're saying hateful and harmful content is hard to define, and we know this is a sensitive topic, etc., etc. All right. Well, first of all, this was targeted at something very specific. Hate speech in general. But it was mostly targeted at Ernie Gygax, who's the son of Gary Gygax, one of the original authors and one of the main faces behind the original Dungeons and Dragons and TSR, of course. Because he came out as transphobic and racist. Ernie Gygax did. Now, of course, it's since come out that these were probably views held by at least some other family members, perhaps even Gary himself. I met Gary many years ago at Gen Con. He was a really nice guy. He was very happy to have all the attention when D&D 3 launched. Just judging from, how do I say this? Generational outlooks that were common in the Midwest when Gary was growing up and aging and alive, I would not be surprised if he held views that would be considered objectionable today. You know, I would not be at all shocked. And this goes kind of back to the discussions I've had about people like H.P. Lovecraft and Robert E. Howard, who for their time were, even as we have said here before, wildly racist and you know, misogynist. In the case of Howard, there is some commentary and evidence in some of his letters of what we would consider deep-seated misogyny today. You know, we should never condone it. We should never say it's okay. These guys didn't know any better. Because again, even by their cultural standards of the time, of the 20s and 30s, some of the things they said were you know, bigoted. But you can say I can separate the artist from the work. Unless they're still alive, like Ernie Gygax, who has just doubled down and continued and now attempted to sue for the TSR name and rights to TSR products while still on Twitter spouting this transphobic and racist commentary. And of course, everyone's sitting there going, and now again, I have no contact with Ernie. I don't know anything about the guy. I'm not invested in him or his work. I'm going, man, just shut up. It's kind of like when Sandy Peterson, the author of the original Call of Cthulhu, made several TERF and transphobic remarks a couple of years ago. And everybody's just saying, you know, if this is your belief, this is your belief. But as soon as you start putting that out there publicly, and he is now off Call of Cthulhu. Sandy Peterson is no longer an active member of Chaosium and Call of Cthulhu. And again, you know, he's another one I met several times over the years at conventions. And I was always a big fan of his work. And what do you say now? You can't excuse it. You can't condone it. I'm just happy that the newer products go out of their way to say, no matter what attitudes are taken by people of the time period of the game you're playing, this does not reflect the attitudes of these authors of the system or the game master. Last night in the Call of Cthulhu game, there is one NPC in this scenario that is a sexist and definitely bigoted that the characters run into. It's 1922, rural Cape Cod. This person is not enlightened. His attitudes probably would be more prevalent at that time in this location than I made them throughout the game. But you know, it's always that tough call when even when you introduce a character like this, and even when two people out of the group have known you in person, and they know these are not your attitudes, you always have to make it very clear. This is a character I'm representing, you know, and I don't think anyone had a problem with it. I got absolutely no, even from I had two players who I believe were not Caucasian. And they did not have any, you know, they were like, yeah, the guy's a racist. I'm like, yeah, the guy's a racist, you know, like, you know, it's this character. So, but we're at a stage now that you kind of you can't kind of wink and nod and go, well, he doesn't really mean that, or it's okay. We know it's terrible, but you know, we're going to publish his books anyway. This entire clause in OGL 1.1, which is the only thing out of the document that I agree with, was apparently written specifically with Ernie Gygax and, quote, new TSR, yes, spelled like new metal, and I've said all the big problems with new TSR are the same problems with new metal, that they were directly targeting him and his work and saying there is absolutely no way we're going to accept this kind of content in our products. And again, a lot of people went, you know, bananas and began saying, oh, they're, you know, well, lines and veils are perfect. Lines and veils are perfect. And I have a content warning, at least in all of my games, I have content warnings if they're going to be there. What's wrong with new metal? It's the same thing that's wrong. It's the same thing that's wrong with new TSR. I'll just shut up. You know what? There's some new metal, even some new metal that I like objectively. I know it's awful. I kind of like in a guilty way. I'm like it is catchy. Like it's really catchy. Like, you know, like I can't get the song out of my head, even though I can't stand it. But it always so. I never got into a fight at a metal show or a hardcore show until Pantera became popular. And that's all I'm going to say. And I know they're technically not new metal. I know everybody worships Dimebag Darrell, and I know all that. And I'm not dissing. That's true. I mean, right. New metal at least has talent. New metal at least has talent. Ernie Gygax apparently does not even have talent writing, and that's a whole other discussion. I haven't read enough of his work to care, you know, to know. But right, new metal at least has an appeal, and it's interesting because I had a long discussion with this about someone in the Baltimore scene who is an African American woman, a little bit younger than me, or somewhat younger than me, and she was posting stuff from new metal bands. I'm like those guys are total, like in this particular band, I'm like, those guys are known to be like total scumbags. She's like, you have to understand the fact that they incorporated things like reggae and hip hop. It was the first time non-white people started getting into metal, and it was okay. I was like, cool. Like, what can I say to that? Like, I certainly wasn't gonna argue with her. You know, I thought it was really interesting because here I am, like, oh, there's a bunch of jocks who are all, you know, sexist and racist. I mean, of course, a lot of metal was sexist at that time. You know, just look at Manowar or whoever. You know, but new metal, it was always just like. It was shortly after that all started breaking that there was this influx of people into shows. I mean, like an Overkill show, and PJ and I have talked endlessly about Overkill. Like there was like this jock guy starting a fight with me at an Overkill show, and I'm like part of me is like, all right, this guy's huge. He's gonna, you know, he'll beat me to a pulp if I actually do fight this guy. And luckily there were other people there who I knew who just totally diffused it and said to the dude, like, you know, calm down. But part of me was like, what are you doing here? You know, like, you know, what are you doing here? I don't even know what you're doing here. Like, who are you? Like, you know, it was really a weird thing. And that was a weird thing that I saw as soon as that whole scene started breaking. Watch the documentary that's on either Netflix or Hulu. I don't remember. I think it's on Hulu. On Woodstock. On the Woodstock with you know, Korn and Limp Bizkit and Kid Rock and all that. So, and Metallica was also a contributor to this. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And it drew in a crowd that formerly, and I remember there were these frat guys walking around singing Metallica songs when I was in college, all the newer Metallica stuff. But they were like the first guys to go beat up on someone who looked different. You know what I mean? And it was like this total inversion of the culture and the counterculture. And that was, in fact, one of my biggest issues with that whole scene. Like I said, I kind of blame it all on Pantera. Even though I know that's probably not entirely fair. But Phil Anselmo was one of those guys. He's like one of the worst guys out there. Like he, you know, he's the guy that throws up a Nazi salute during a show and is then like, oh, I didn't know what it meant. I was just joking. And I'm like, come on, you're just a dirtbag, you know? Everyone knows it. Like, and you know what? I've seen them live. I've sat through their shows. Musically, they definitely have some good points. But he was just like, even at the time, even in the early 90s, I was like, this guy is just a scumbag. You know, there's absolutely nothing I can do to get into this show with this guy being their front man. So, yeah, that was a twist and a turn. Went from Ernie Gygax, spiraled right from Ernie Gygax into new metal, which, as I said, that's been kind of the joke of people calling it new TSR. I'm like, it's exactly the same thing. Except Gary's not like, you know, a young football player, 20-year-old football hooligan. He's like, you know, just another old fat nerd like everybody else who's you know, deciding he's going to try to cash in. Oh, well, but see, I would argue that those guys, I haven't seen as many of those guys come into the hobby, but I've definitely seen a lot of those guys who've been in the hobby for a long time become more vocal. And you know what? For a while I didn't see it. Like I heard about it, I knew it was happening, but there was one thread that I was on, and I think it was on either a D&D or a Pathfinder group that I left, that it suddenly just became overrun by like these entitled white guys like busting on about trans wooden Drecker and kind of like busting on people who were different within the hobby or had different opinions, or people who were being snowflakes and too sensitive. Back to CC's, yeah, content warnings and lines and veils. So I actually do have content warnings on all of my games that I'm running, and I'm more or less telling people what they could possibly be offended by in the game. And I'm getting very blunt and detailed about it. And there is a little bit of lines and veils. I have been working with lines and veils a little bit. I didn't have any need for it last night. This group, they were all raring to go to a horror game where they were willing to just be disgusted and annoyed by people. So that was good. Well, and that's the thing. And that's the thing, is that recently, due to quite a few other cultural elements in the socio-political climate, these people now feel that it's perfectly fine saying whatever they want. Nah, it's not a sidetrack. We're at the sidetrack point. I talked for the first 35 minutes in a kind of focused fashion. Then after that, I don't care. All bets are off. Yeah, but no, those guys have always been there. They always have been there. And it's funny because a lot of them are like super nerds who just feel great discriminating against other nerds. I'm like, come on, like, like it's not 1985 anymore. And we were playing D&D last week, and Blake runs it, and Blake and I have a long history, and Blake and I both come from backgrounds that people were not necessarily, family members were not necessarily enlightened, and they probably would be calling people snowflakes today. And someone made an off-color joke, and we were just like, I mean, that's like gaming 1990. Like that joke that was made ironically would have been made seriously around so many gaming tables, probably up through 2000, when it's mostly a bunch of Caucasian males sitting around. And that type of joke, which was said, again, ironically in the context of the group, would not have been ironic. It would not have been funny or clever. It would have been that this is this person's real opinion. So, well, that's always it, right? Like, for once, these guys now have somebody in the culture they can pick on, and they feel better about themselves. And it's endemic, and you see it all over. I would say it's still now PAX Unplugged, at least, and I've heard from certain people about trans discrimination within gaming groups, and racist discrimination within gaming groups. And again, if you're dealing with someone's private gaming group, you're never going to change that. But PAX Unplugged was by far the most rainbow, ethnic, diverse, cross-cultural event for gaming that I have ever been to. And it was pretty cool. It was pretty cool to walk in and be like, okay, this is definitely a not DEF CON in, Edison, New Jersey in 1992. It's definitely not that. And it's definitely not even PAX when I was there 4 years ago. It was a very different world. And guess what? All those people were there to play Dungeons and Dragons. So again, that 300,000 people or whatever number, it was 30,000 or whatever the number of people that were at PAX were, the total number that ended up, they weren't there. Some of them were there to play Pathfinder or try different games, but most of them were there. Yeah, 1992. So 99. So I guess, yeah, that's right. Yeah, you were at DEF CON. Yeah, okay. So 1992 is when you would have been there, because I'd gone to several before I even met you guys. But yeah, that is where I met you guys. That or DexCon. I don't remember. Boy, I have so many stories about DexCon too. Not even about. Yeah, that was it. All right. Yeah. Okay. That was 92. All right. So I called it. I called the year and the location. It was the DEF CON. That's right. I couldn't remember whether the DEF CON or one of the other conventions. DexCon, I've got this whole. So you want to talk about sleazy goings on? Sleazy goings on in the game industry. We could talk about early double exposure events, but we won't. We won't. And not even just among the LARPers, among the staff of the convention and the not paying game masters what they said they would, or compensating them. Not that I know any of these people personally. Not that I still don't hold grudges, but it's, yeah. I mean, so sleazy, yeah. So sleazy. Well, and you know what? What's really funny is Guar was actually at some of those conventions. I saw them at City Gardens the night before they showed up at DEF CON in full costume, and I'm like standing next to Sleazy P Martini in the dealer's room, and I just looked at him. He looks at me and he's like, "Didn't I dump blood on you last night?" I'm like, "Yep." It was this really surreal situation. I was like, "Oh wow, this is really strange." But that was a set of flashbacks going on there. Yeah, a lot of the stuff that went on within double exposure was really kind of shady. And again, I had a first row seat to some of it because I got involved in running a game that a certain other game master, a live action event that a certain other game master bailed on. You might remember that whole thing. I think you do. I think you were involved in all that, or at least you were around at that for that. And I know you picked it up at some point later too. But I picked up one of the first games that he bailed on and threw a temper tantrum on. And I was supposed to get all the stuff he was supposed to get, and Vinny just like totally blew me off. He was like, "Yeah, no." That's an old story though. I don't still hold grudges though, because I'm not that type of guy. I'm a very, very moderately tempered New Jersey Italian, you know, because we're good at that. That's what we're good at. So with that, I think we're going to wrap it up for tonight. Thanks for coming on. Thanks for chatting. Good to see everybody. Good to see Maeve pop on. Good to see Barry for the first time. Drop in. You know where to find me. I might be popping on a pop-up chat while I'm working throughout the next week. But I'm going to plan for 2 weeks. We'll do another one of these chats. Something topical. Hopefully it won't be about OGL. If you're going to come out, it'd be great to see you. Great to see you. I'm going to be pretty crunched as far as running games, but I'm hoping to have some time. Friday night, I think by 9 or so, I should be free. I don't know what day you're going to catch you later, man. I don't know what time you guys are going to get there when you're going to get there. But definitely. So if you guys show up and you want to get into a game, and even when my games are full, we can, if you ping me in advance, maybe we can work up something. Be a good flashback to the 90s. All right, friends. Thank you very much. Yeah, I'll figure out something. If nothing else, we'll go out for dinner or something in or around the con, even if we're doing other things during the con. So, from the Tomes, Twitch TV from the Tomes, at Fox and Board Games on YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. foxandboardgames.com is the landing pad for everything that's going on. Keep an eye out. A lot more stuff's coming down the pike, some of which I'm not quite yet at liberty to talk about till it develops, but we're looking forward to it. Thank you all very much. Have a good night.